After the meetings that I had here and in Murfreesboro, I have a whole list of sermon ideas, and I continue to get emails with people giving lists of ideas of sermons that they would like to hear over the next year. A sermon idea that came up actually a couple of months ago and a couple people have talked to me about is a sermon or two or three, over the next year on basic concepts of raising children. Now, there's a lot of us who might say, well, I don't have children to raise anymore. But I know as a grandfather, my daughter and her husband are always trying to raise their children, and I don't interfere, but every once in a while there's some questions asked, or I try to interact with the kids, and I have to think, okay, how do I interact with these kids now as granddad? And there's certain principles that still apply, even if you're a grandparent. Now, I say if you're a grandparent, you can't interfere with the raising of your grandchildren. Okay? But at the same time, in most families, there's always some, hey, can you help out here? Or the kids start to figure out, okay, I can go to grandma, I can go to grandpa, and I can get some advice or some help. And there's relationship forms. And you have to support the values, the same value system. One thing that's very important to children is to find out that their family basically has the same value system. Then they want to find out if the church they belong to has the same value system. That's why they're so sensitive to what they consider hypocrisy, because we're all supposed to have the same value system, and they haven't figured out yet that there's a difference between a value system and individual situations or individual behavior or all the other things we have to deal with. So we're going to talk about some basic concepts of one aspect of raising children, and one that's sometimes very misunderstood. We'll start, as so many of these types of sermons do, in Deuteronomy 6, because I want to point out a couple points here that is very, very important. Deuteronomy 6, even the classes that are taught once a month in the congregation here are called the Deuteronomy 6 classes, because this is the basis for really what is biblical child rearing. And there's a couple points I want to bring out and then zero in on this one aspect. Let's start in verse 4 of Deuteronomy 6. Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength. This sentence leads into the next sentence, and what is important to understand here, it is a community statement. He's telling all of Israel that he's their God, and that all of Israel is commanded to love him. So this command is to everyone here, whether you're a parent or grandparent or have no children. All of us are to love God with all our heart and all our mind and all our strength. That leads into this next statement. For this to be carried on, God expected families to run a certain way. There's certain things that are supposed to happen in families. He says, and these words which I command you today shall be in your heart. shape our lives and keep us from going all over the place. Now, as a parent, you cannot make your child respond to God. You cannot convert your child. Only God can convert somebody. You can't make your child stay in the church. They have free will. They have free will. But the younger they are, the more influence you have on who they develop as a human being. And we can have a profound effect on whether they're honest. Now, sometimes, I've seen parents raise kids and be very good parents, and the child ends up being very dishonest. A lot of times because they got involved in drugs or something, and it just changed them. But raising children, if it wasn't important, let's all just give our children to the state, right? And let them raise the child. Well, nobody wants the state to, unfortunately, a lot of people today want the state to raise their children. That's a recipe for great disaster. God says that it is the parent's responsibility. So, the church has the Deuteronomy 6 classes. As parents, we can never expect the church to be the primary teacher of our children. It's mom and dad's primary job. And in some cases where there's only one parent, it's that one parent's primary job. And you know what? It's hard when you're one. Man or woman, it's hard. When there's two of you, you can play tag team. I'll never forget how many times my wife would have a child and walk over and say, "He's your son." Tag team. He's yours for a while because I can't deal with him anymore, right? So when there's two, it gets a lot easier. But it's the same commission. And it has to be in us first before we can teach it. So what we tend to do, if God's way isn't in us first, we tend to try to raise our children the way we were raised. Or we do the opposite. Boy, I tell you, my parents were really strict. My kids are going to have to live a strict life like that. And so people do the opposite of what their parents did and lead to just as much disaster. It's also true, remember, this is based on loving God. What we tend to do is many times we approach raising children in the context of how we see God. If I see God as a strict disciplinarian who is always correcting me, who is always negative towards me, who is always trying to get me, and is always forcing me to do things I don't want to do, guess how you're going to approach your children? If that's how you see God, they're going to constantly be corrected. They're never going to be encouraged. They're going to be constantly put down and told your basic problem in life is you have, pride. Oh, look, I got an A. That's pride. You got a problem. And they'll be punished and punished and punished until they don't even know why they're being punished. But that's how some people see God. And so that's how they approach their children. Other people see God as this sort of big grandfather that loves them so much he doesn't care what they do. And so that's how they approach their children. Oh, I just love you. Aren't they so cute? Oh, I couldn't do that. They'd get mad at me. If your children are never mad at you, you're probably doing something wrong. Understanding the nature of children, okay? And so we go to this extreme where we're negative and constantly harping and punishing and correcting, or we're the other extreme. Oh, they're just children. Well, I don't care if they're just children. They can't steal somebody else's stuff, Well, they don't understand. They're only 4 years old. Oh, yes, they do. A 4-year-old can understand that stealing is wrong. I know. I raise children, and I have grandchildren that are 4. I will tell the story since she's not here. My 8-year-old, I'm holding the baby here last week, the 3-month-old. And the 8-year-old comes over and starts grabbing her face. And, the little baby's almost crying and trying to get her hands off. And and I said, "Stop that, you're hurting her." She looked at me and she did it again. I said, "I'm not telling you again, stop it, you're hurting her." And she stepped back, and then she went to do it again, and I said, "Don't you do that again." And she looked at me and said, "Who are you to judge me?" Now, we have a very interesting relationship. So you'd have to understand our relationship would happen next, because I said, "I want you to think about what I'm going to say next real deeply, okay?" Now, she gets real serious when I say that. And she's just staring at me, and I said, "If I came up to you or one of the kids and started hurting you, and you said, 'Stop.' And I said, 'No.' And I just kept doing it. And you said, 'Stop. You're hurting me.' And I said, 'Who are you to judge me?' Would that be okay?" Boy, she stared for the longest time because she's trapped, And she said, "No, it's not okay." And I said, "I'm really glad. Because if you would have said, 'Yes, it's okay,' I was going to pinch you. And when you screamed, 'Grandpa, stop that!' No, don't be real hard. But, I was going to pinch you. And when you said, 'Grandpa, that hurts,' I would have said, 'How dare you judge me?'" She just shook her head and walked away. Okay. The old man always does this to me. Okay, he's got me. I got it. But I have to make her reason through, okay? If I would have just said, "Stop that, get out of here," she would have never reasoned through what was wrong. I don't know why. She has to reason through everything. And when she reasoned through it, yeah, he's right. And I haven't had her do that with the babysitter in my lap since. Okay. Not because she's afraid that I'll pinch her, because I've never done it. Although I would have. Not hard, but it would have been, "Grandpa, you're hurting me." Yeah. So we have to understand each child is different. We can't be this indulgent grandfather figure, but we can't be also this harsh disciplinarian that leaves them feeling worthless and that they're not loved. That means we have to have a meaningful biblical understanding of God first and his way first, and then we teach it to them. We teach it to them. So we're going to look at then one very specific aspect of raising children, and it's the word discipline. Now, discipline means a lot of different things to a lot of people. And there are some people who say, "Oh, good, we need more discipline. So you're going to tell us about how to spank our children." No, I'm going to talk about the concept of discipline here and what it actually means. Why is there discipline? Why? The word discipline literally means training that develops self-control, character, and efficiency. Training that develops self-control. Now, as parents, we're going to have to be real careful here. Because sometimes we punish our children because we want control or because we've lost control, not because the purpose is to teach them self-control. The purpose is of discipline, however you discipline them, is to teach them to be able to control themselves. Proverbs 22. You say, "But children are so exasperating." Yeah, it's the nature of children. They're so foolish. Yeah, it's the nature of children. Proverbs 22, verse 15. "Foolishness is bound up in the heart of a child." Now, you've read that probably 100 times. But have you ever thought about what that really means? To be bound up is like you're in chains. A child is in the chains of foolishness. Now, there's a number of reasons for that. Sometimes it's because that's all their brain function is at the time. Sometimes it's because they don't have enough knowledge or understanding. Sometimes it's because they just are emotionally out of control. Sometimes they're just children, and children can be foolish. And not all foolish behavior is evil. Sometimes you sort of laugh at foolish behavior. But understand, what's funny at 2 is not funny at 16. So we may laugh at a 2-year-old, it's okay, but you don't want a 16-year-old doing that same behavior. It's not funny then. So we have to understand they are foolish, and the whole purpose of what we're trying to do is help them grow up so that they're less and less foolish. Now, that doesn't mean taking away a child's sense of wonder, a child's sense of fun. If I'm having a bad day, all I have to do is spend an hour with my 6 grandkids. All I have to do is go to the circus. Because that's what it is when you got 6 grandkids. It's the circus. I go to the circus. I'm with them, and pretty soon we're looking at bugs and rocks, and we're into what children do, which that's not foolishness. There's a wonder that children have. There's a joy that children have that we need to go share once in a while. But foolishness, which is really actually selfishness, is bound into their heart. We say, well, not my 1-year-old. Well, they're headed that way. It's bound in their heart. They're under these chains. Part of what we do is, if we can teach them to have self-control in the way that God teaches, they'll be free. Because when you're bound by foolishness, you're a very unhappy person as an adult. Because I've met foolish adults. They just can't function. They still think like children. Some of the most unhappy people you ever meet. Then he says, the rod of correction will drive it far from him. So we have to apply discipline. But remember, we think, we have to have a rod. There is a time for harsh discipline. But with little or smaller children, you have to always think in terms, what can they understand? What can they understand? I actually put this story in one of my pastor's updates recently because I've been writing some things. I wrote something about child rearing because I've had so many questions about it. And it was something that had happened a few years ago that, I had to think about it at the time. I took 4 of the grandkids off down the street. They were visiting, and there was a construction site. And it was a Sunday. There's nobody working. And we walked around the construction site, and they saw where they were pouring the concrete. And we didn't, touch anything. We just looked around. They thought it was very interesting. And then one of the older ones started to pick some flowers and said, I'm going to pick these for Mama. And then one of the others, oh, look, I found some pretty rocks. So 3 of the older ones, they're picking flowers, and they got some really nice rocks. And pretty soon it's like, oh, let's go back and give the flowers and the rocks to the... Great, so we're headed back. And I hadn't been paying a lot of attention to the 2-year-old because he was just, of course, he's not 2 anymore, but he was just hanging around me, But I looked, and he's carrying something in his hand, too. And I said, what do you have? For Mama. Oh, what you got? He opened up his hand. There was a cigarette butt and some dog poop. Okay, the first reaction was, but no. You got to see, he doesn't know any better. He's happy. He's grinning. He's like, I got her something. It's going to be great. She's gonna like my present the best, I said, that's really dirty. And then, I said, no, just drop it. Wipe your hands. So then I wiped these hands. I said, now don't touch your face until we get in and I can wash your hands. And he's a little scared. I said, no, just don't touch your face. We'll be okay. And wash your hands. And I tell you what, let's find a few rocks. So we found a few rocks, and I put them in my pocket. I said, well, after you wash your hands, I'll give them to you. So we went in, and he followed me right in, and I washed his hand real good and gave him a little lecture how cigarette butts and dog poop are not something you should pick up. It was okay. He wasn't traumatized or anything. He got cleaned up. I gave him his rocks, and off he went to give it to Mama. Now, the point is, it would have been easy for me to say, what are you doing, you little rugrat? Which I have said before to him, but... That foolishness wasn't evil. It's where he was as a child. You teach God's way when you walk with him, when you talk with him, right? All that is a chance to say, hey, kid, that doesn't work. Aren't you glad God doesn't punch you every time you do something that's a little stupid? So we have to think about age-appropriate reaction. If your 12-year-old's doing that, there's a problem, okay? but not a 2-year-old. Not a 2-year-old. Sometimes they're just silly behavior. It's just a child being a child. You watch them play, you watch them pretend. It's okay. But you don't want them to be 35 and spending their whole lives in a fantasy world, right? So we have to think about how working them through this, but not making them adults too early. Not making them adults too early. You have to understand your child's, each child has a specific personality and a very specific set of abilities. I remember reading a book years ago about a man. He said he had, I forget how many children in the family, 3 or 4, and his father had died, and his mother raised them by herself. And all the children had gone on to be very successful and so forth. He said he went into her house one day and noticed a whole bunch of books he had never noticed before. And the books were sets of books that basically were, here was all of his interest, here was all of his brother's interest, here was all of, in other words, she read to understand what interested them. She worked with them as individuals. Sometimes we think all children are the same, and they're not. God doesn't deal with us all the same, does he? He doesn't deal with all of us the same. Some of us, like me, every once in a while, he just hits real hard. I'm not saying you should hit your children, you know what I mean. But I'm saying that God sometimes, you should never punch or slap or hit a child. But I'm saying sometimes God gives me a little spanking because that's what it takes to get my attention, and I understand it. Other times he's just, I think my wife is so easy for him to work with. Not me. But he treats us differently because he should. So that each of us develops the way he wants us to develop, using our own personalities, using our own abilities. My one daughter, we found out at a very early age, when she was about, 3 or 4, and she was going door to door selling her paintings, that she would paint and go out and sell it to the neighbors, and we started to realize money was real important to her. And she was easy to work with when she would do something like mistreat one of the other kids. I'd say, whoa, that was wrong. Are you going to punish me? No, but you're going to give her a dime for the way you treated her. Oh, Daddy, please spank me, please. No. But you didn't hurt me. You hurt her. She's the one you pay the dime to. Oh, no. I won't tell you the story, but I can remember one time when she had to give her entire life savings to her sister. She still to this day remembers that, okay? My entire piggy bank, and well, yeah, what you did to her was really, really bad. But she learned from that. She learned from that because somehow that meant something to her. This is of value to me. I'm losing it because of what I did. I guess I better not do this anymore. Boy, that was easy, when something says, oh, that's a penny, and they're all upset, and I won't do it again. Well, that's good. That's an easy correction there. So you have to look at whatever punishment you do. And sometimes there is a time for a harsh punishment on a child. If I have a wee little one and he's going to run out in the street, and I give him a little swat on the bottom, not enough to hurt or give a bruise, but he cries for 30 seconds, that's better than to get hit by a truck. It seems harsh at the time to him, but it's not. It's not. Because sometimes children can't learn unless, that's pretty horrible. I don't like that. Then they do something else. A 2-year-old doesn't reason yet. They can't reason through what you're trying to teach them. Now, an 8-year-old, a 10-year-old should be able to reason through a lot of things. There's still things they can't reason through. There's things a 15 or 16-year-old can't reason through yet. They just can't. I think there's certain things you can't reason through until you're in your mid-20s. And then you can start figuring certain things out. Also remember, anytime you discipline a child, you must immediately or very quickly afterwards reunite with them and reestablish that they're accepted by you and you love them. You have to do that. You punish a child and let them sit in their room for 3 hours, and many times, sometimes some personalities need to do that because they'll think it through. But most children, that'll just make them angry. You have to reestablish with them. You have to reestablish with them. My family, when I was young, not when we were real young, when we got a little bit older, they didn't do it, but they would spank us when there was something we needed spanked for. But I remember after the spanking, first of all, there was the explanation of why, and then there was the spanking, and then nobody left the room until a hug took place. And if you couldn't hug them, they would just sit there. You can leave when you feel like you can hug me now and you understand. And I still remember that because somehow, okay, I was wrong, I got punished, but we're okay. Everything's okay in the world, and then we'll go out and play. I still remember that. I'm 6 years old, 5 years old. I still remember that. That reconnecting has to happen. Especially, the hard thing with children is justice is so important. And if you ever punish them and they didn't do it, sometimes that's going to happen. You're going to misjudge something as a parent. And you're going to punish a child for something they didn't do. There's a point where if you ever find that out, you have to say to them, you're right. That was unjust. I did not understand. See, the justice system didn't fail. A judgment made by a person who usually makes the right judgment failed. That's life, folks. A child's got to figure that out. Life is, there is a godly justice system, and even the best of people fail once in a while. That's life. And they will grow up and do their failures too. They'll grow up and commit their failures also. So why do we do this? Once again, why do we discipline? Remember, parental discipline is to help them build their own self-discipline. They must understand why. Now, they don't understand why it may be 2 or 3 or 4, but as time goes on, they can begin to understand stealing is wrong. Hitting your brother or sister with the toy truck is wrong, okay? There are just certain behaviors that are not accepted. Throwing a temper tantrum is wrong. My grandkids found out that doesn't work very well. My wife and I they'll start, they don't do that anymore. They're all older enough. Enough now they don't. But when they were a little younger and they tried, it's like, hey, when you're done making a fool of yourself, we'll talk. Now walk away. Doesn't take long if nobody's watching me. That's right. No one cares. You want to act like an idiot, act like an idiot. When you're done acting like an idiot, we'll talk. And it usually takes about 15 seconds. Can we talk now? Sure. Now, sometimes a child can be, you feed them 2 donuts and then wonder why they're throwing a temper tantrum. They may not have any control of what's going on. That's reality. We do things to children by letting them eat certain things, and then we blame their behavior when they have no control over what's the chemical reaction that's going on in their body. They have no control over it. So we have to be real careful about punishing children for something they have no control over. Maybe it's the time to sit down and say, eating 2 donuts is not a good idea, child. This doesn't work. Because all of us have done something chemically to our bodies, eating something, drinking too much coffee, whatever, that you realize I have no control of the fact that, I'm driving down the road at 80 miles an hour and shaking my fist at everybody I go by. Well, you do have a control as an adult. You can pull over and say, stop this. A 5-year-old does not. They just know they feel horrible and they're out of control. And they have no idea why. We as the adult has to look into that. We have to look at that. We have to think about that. Now, sometimes they're just rebellious. Well, then there's punishment for rebellion. God punishes us every time we're rebellious. That's a whole different thing here. Our job as parents is to be able to tell the difference and deal with it appropriately. Or sometimes what happens, we're out of control. We're out of control, and they begin to believe that they don't believe in a value system of right and wrong. What they believe is wrong is making mommy and daddy mad. That's what's wrong. So whatever I do, I have to do not to make them mad. Well, that means when mom and daddy aren't around, they're going to do whatever they want. There's no internal value system. It can't just be based on mommy and daddy being bad. Now, it's not wrong to show anger, but when we're out of control, we actually reinforce their behavior. I know I've done it. I have done it. Remember this, even with that little child that you're dealing with, that 8-year-old or that 10-year-old. You know what our primary job is? I realized this one time when someone asked my dad. They asked him, they said, okay, you've raised 3 kids. What's the single most important aspect of raising children? He said, you realize early on that your job is to prepare them to leave you. Now, it wasn't long after that I started having kids, and I thought, wow, that's true. If I just prepare them to fulfill my emotional needs, they are not going to do well as adults. We actually spend 20 years of our lives with each child, preparing that child to leave us so that they are functional adults. Now, that's a whole new relationship. I really enjoy dealing with my 3 kids as adults. I'm glad they're not kids anymore. I like that stage. But we're adults. We have adult conversations, and I don't have to tell them what to do all the time. And I'm always telling my wife, nope, don't say a word. Nope, don't say a word. They're adults now. They'll come to you. When they have a question, they'll come to you. Otherwise, let it go. It's hard for a mother to do that, right? But she's learned it. Yeah, you're right. They're adults. We train them to leave us. That's not drag them back, okay? But let's be there when they have a question. And we have great discussions with them as adults. I like being around these adults. I like being around these adults. I like the people they married. So we are preparing children to leave us. When you look at it that way, it's, wow, I better equip this kid. It's a mean, tough world out there. I better give them everything I can and every way that I can to prepare them for that. So every time you discipline a child by simply saying no, it's not your turn. Every time you discipline a child by making them apologize because they said something mean to somebody. Every time you stop them and say, I'm sorry, adults are talking right now, you're just going to have to wait a moment. And you make them stand there and wait. You know what you're teaching them? Self-discipline. They're controlling themselves. Now you have to, after a while, say, okay, what is it that you needed? Okay. You can't ignore them for the next hour. But you have to wait a minute. Adults are talking, and you let that person finish. They're learning self-control. They're learning to see other people as human beings and not objects. They'll start to see life differently. And that, you didn't have to punish them, but that is discipline. You have to have some control. Every time you say you must clean your room, and they don't do it. Depends on how old they are. The younger ones, we punished. When they got to be teenagers, we said, live in the filth. And when they come and said to Mom, would you come clean my room? Nope. And then there were times, you can either clean your room or you can pay your mom to clean your room. Oh, money's involved, they clean the room. And when they're younger, it's you clean your room. And there's no questions. They clean their room. Privileges are taken away. Certain things happen because the room must be cleaned. There are things that must be enforced. And we make them face the frustration of having self-control. Because the opposite of self-control is basically selfishness, out of control selfishness. Now, do children like being disciplined? No. But once again, find an undisciplined adult, and you find an unhappy person. You find a person that can't have relationships with others. They just can't. All they're zeroed in is their own feelings, what's going on with them, what's going on. They can't even see around that bubble they've created. Understand this, parents. God did not create the family as a democracy. Your children don't get to vote on what's right and wrong. You were sent there to teach them what's right and wrong. You were ordained by God. Parents is an institution created by God. That's why he says you shouldn't have children until you're married, because those parents have a job. Marriage can produce children, and when it does, you have a job. Your job description is given by God. Love me with all your heart and all your might and all your strength, and have my ways in your heart, and then teach it to your children every day. Talk to them about it. Tell them when you put them to bed. Tell them when they're working with you. In other words, you're just not talking about it. You're seeing, they're supposed to be seeing it in us. Supposed to be seeing it in us. Stop being guilty, feeling guilty because your child doesn't like you because you told them to do something that was right. Oh, they'll get over it. Stop being controlled by 4-year-olds. We shouldn't be controlled by 4-year-olds. What was it? Last night we had Sabbath dinner together, and the little 2-year-old Abby said she was upset. She was mad. I said, "You're mad?" She said, "Yes." And I said, "Why?" "Because Mama won't let me have this drink she wanted." So we're going to eat dinner. Yeah, she won't let you have it. "Well, you won't let me have it? I guess you can just leave." I said, "Okay." She said, No, I didn't mean leave. I really didn't mean that." I said, "I know. What did you mean?" And she thought about it a minute, and she said, "Oh, I'm upset because," she reasoned through it too. I said, "Then go ask your mama. Don't take it out on me. Don't take it on anybody else. You go ask her." She said no a little bit ago. I don't know what she's going to say now. She went back and she came back. She had this big grin and she said, "I could drink it with dinner." I said, "Well, your mom's pretty smart here, okay? She knows what she's doing, so don't." So she waited and had some with dinner. Don't let the 2-year-olds control us. We're supposed to control them, okay? Now, sometimes they can be a handful. Sometimes they can be rebellious. Think how God deals with us every day. Here's how we act as parents sometimes. I read this years ago, and I actually wrote it down. It's in a book that was written in the 1980s. It was called The 6-Point Plan for Raising Happy, Healthy Children. And the author, his name was John Rosemont. He actually wrote a little story of what if referees conducted a basketball game like parents do in their house. He says, the referee's job is to simply enforce the rules consistently and dispassionately. Imagine the chaos that would result if nearly every time a rule was broken, he complained, threatened, gave second chances, and often vented towards the players themselves. And then launched into a red-faced emotional tirade. Okay, because that's what parents do sometimes, right? So what would happen in a basketball game if the officials did that? A player on the red team takes a pass from one of his teammates and drives towards the basket for a layup. As he nears the goal, a blue player sticks out a foot and sends the red player sprawling on the ground. Immediately, the referee blows his whistle. He stops and he points at the person who committed the foul. Was that an accident, or did you do that on purpose? Looking sheepish, the blue player says, "Oh, it's just an accident, honest. I didn't mean to do it." "Well, okay. I'll let you go this time. Don't do it again." You see, at that point, if he trips somebody, it doesn't matter if it was an accident or not. There's still a penalty for it. People have to realize in life, even accidents have consequences, right? But we don't let kids, "Oh, okay." I see that all the time with my grandkids. "I didn't mean to do it." I don't care if you meant to do it. You hurt your brother or your sister. The behavior caused something bad. Okay, we're not punishing you for what was in your heart because in your heart was not to do this. So you're getting a lesser punishment because the behavior is still breaking the rules. I blew a whistle and called a foul because it's a foul. Go tell them you're sorry and tell them you didn't mean to do it. "Oh, okay. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do it." Because it doesn't matter. The behavior still caused something bad to happen. The next incident occurs, and the blue player is set up to take a shot from the corner. Before he can release the ball, red player leaps up from behind him and grabs his arm, preventing the shot. Again, the referee blows the whistle, stops the play, and confronts the guilty player. How many times have I told you not to do that? Let me tell you something. I'm about to run out of patience with you. Next time you do something like that, you'll be sorry and I'll call a foul. Soon another infraction occurs and another confrontation. "Why did you do that?" the referee pleads. The player just shrugs his shoulders, looks down at the floor and says, "I don't know." Every parent's been through that. "What am I going to do with you?" the referee says. As the clock ticks on, fouls become more frequent and obvious. With nearly everyone, the referee's reaction to the same reprimand, threat, and complain about the players. Occasionally, actually, he calls a penalty, but only after verbally just getting out of control and screaming and hollering and yelling. Eventually, the game is in shambles, a virtual free-for-all. Players push, trip, and even hit one another for control of the ball. All the while, the referee runs around red-faced and sweating, looking increasingly distraught. Finally, as the melee reaches a peak, he suddenly twists his body in 10 different directions at once and shouts, "I've had it!" Everybody go to your room. Yeah, been there, right? Well, actually, I've seen some NBA games that look like that. But that's not the way, if we saw a ref doing that, we would say that guy needs to be fired. Right? But do we do that as parents? And you know why we do it? I know why as parents. I don't want him to feel bad towards me. Well, no, we want them to grow up to be functional adults. You want someday for your child to look at a child that they love dearly and say, "Sorry, that's wrong." "Well, I don't like you." "Okay, it's still wrong." And then when they come back crying and say, "I'm sorry, I really do love you. I didn't mean to say I don't like you." And you say, "I know. Did the same thing." Doesn't change the reality of what's right and wrong. Doesn't change what you need to learn and what you need to do and what you need to be as a person. So what do we do? How do we do this? I just want to wrap up here with some ideas. These are just ideas, okay? Now remember, we're dealing with younger children here. You have to set up some ground rules. God only gave 10 basic ground rules to start with. Okay? They're not bad ones. You can't kill your sister. Okay? Well, of course, obviously they're not going to do that. But how about you can't punch your sister? Okay? You can't take a toy and hit your sister. I don't care how frustrated you are. I don't care what you did that was wrong. You can't ratchet it to that level of violence. You set some guidelines. You post the guidelines on the refrigerator for the ones who can read. Now if you have 300 rules, you're headed into Phariseeism here, okay? This isn't going to work. You have a set of very important rules. No television during dinner, no phones, and no video games. Something that simple. We sit together for a half hour or whatever at dinner, and we eat as a family. That's a rule. And then you enforce that rule because they know it's there. Now, they might test you with it, but they know the rule is there. You've told them. And for those who can read, you've posted them. Now, remember, you can't just have a set of don'ts. It's a very negative family that just says, don't. That's a terrible place to grow up as a kid. You also have to create opportunities for them to succeed. You have to give them compliments. You have to give them rewards. Discipline involves rewards, compliments. Remember, the purpose is to get them to learn self-control. So every time they do something right, you're to show them that they did it right. I've talked to 100 people over the years, and that's probably not an exaggeration, that have said, all my parents did was tell me I was bad and I was wrong, and I never felt like I did anything right. Now, the parents may not even know they were doing that. God doesn't do that with us. Because there's these objective standards, and when we do one of them right, we can say, I did that one right. He can say, yeah, you did. There should be appropriate punishments for infractions. If they continue to obey, they get more rewards. If they don't obey, they lose privileges or they get punished. And you have to explain why there's a punishment. Now, not with a 2-year-old, but as they go up, 6, 7, 8, there has to be a reason why. Now, you don't reason with them too long because you'll get into this argument about you shouldn't do this punishment to me. Okay, this is it. Sorry, you were wrong. You're getting punished. Discussion over. You're not going to try to manipulate out of this. Don't let them do that to you. They're smart. They've learned a lot of it from us. They've watched us. So then you must be careful to enforce the rules. If you never enforce the rules, you know what you teach them? You teach them that values of right and wrong are arbitrary, depending upon whoever's in charge at the time. That's a pretty lawless way to approach life. Help them get control of their time. When I say get control of their time, I don't mean you get control of their time. As they grow through these stages, 2, 3, 4, 8, 10, up to 12, you help them get control of their time. We used to have this ritual. I'm bored. Well, go play a game with your brother and sister. I'm bored. Well, go outside and play. I'm bored. Okay, well, we got some jobs around here you could do. Oh, that's okay. And off they'd run. Okay. I remember playing that little game. Remember Calvin and Hobbes? The cartoon Calvin and Hobbes. One of my grandkids loved Calvin and Hobbes. I remember a Calvin and Hobbes strip where Calvin's dad comes in and says, you got to stop watching TV. Now, remember, the whole thing was Calvin's fantasy, because Hobbes was like a real character, talked to him and everything, and then you'd see it from the parents' viewpoint, and Hobbes was just a toy. So it was hilarious. You're inside the mind of this kid. And he's watching TV. His dad says, you've watched enough TV, and you shut off the TV. And he says, I'm bored. He says, you go outside and play. And he's all mad. I don't want to go outside and play. And he says, Dad, you go outside and play right now. So he goes outside, and he's just out there with Hobbes, and he looks at Hobbes, and he says, this is terrible. This is so boring. I can't stand this. I can't believe, they would treat us this way, and on and on and on. And then pretty soon, him and Hobbes are swinging on the swings, and they're playing, and they're wrestling, and they're running through the woods, and time goes by, and time goes by. And finally, the dad yells out, Calvin, you've been out there for hours. It's time for you to come in. Well, I don't want to come in. Well, it's time for you to come in now. So he comes in and he said, see, I told you. We turned off the TV. You had seen enough for a while. You went out and you had fun. You used your imagination. Wasn't it great? But then the last frame is Calvin sitting on his bed, and he looks all depressed. And he looks over at Hobbes and he says, you know, I was having a lot of fun. But anytime they tell me that I'm doing something that's building character, it takes all the fun out of it. That's sort of how a child wouldn't say that, but it's how they feel. It's how they feel. We have to give them alternatives to their time, and they may not like it at first. We have to help them learn to control TV watching, playing electronic games. A young person can literally get addicted to electronic games because it's very smart. Every time you beat a certain level, you feel like you've accomplished something. It's fun. I mean, I'm not against electronic games. You know, the problem is it gives you a little shot of endorphin. Whoa, I did that. You got to go to the next level. Because if you didn't get the shot of endorphin, why would you go on to the next level? You see what I mean? It's like everything else. Oh, wow, this is fun. I'm going to go on to the next. Pretty soon, you know what you're looking for? Especially guys. For some reason, I think it's because men can focus so sharply. They'll get so focused in, it's just like a drug. I've seen young men flunk out of high school, flunk out of college. I've seen young men lose jobs because they're up all night playing video games. They can't stop. And the reason why is, I understand why. You're on a high. I mean, every time I get Mario to do certain things, I'm like, yeah, I'm with the kids. I mean, me and my two grandsons are going, yeah. I mean, you know, we're grunting and groaning and stuff and playing, right? And then it's like, okay, guys, it's enough. We must help them in how much time they spend participating in social media. Social media can twist real relationships. Oh, look, I have 127 friends on Facebook, but I haven't actually talked to a human being for 3 days. That's not good. Okay. I mean, I like texting because it gets things done fast, but I don't text that much because I realize what happens is texting gets in the place of real relationships. Sometimes I'll just make the phone call. I know it's going to take 5 minutes of time instead of 30 seconds, but sometimes that 5 minutes is real important. So we all use those things, but we have to be careful in how we teach children how to use social media. They will say things they would have never, adults will say things on social media that I'm shocked at. They'd never say that to someone's face, but they'll do it there. We also have to help them have a regular bedtime. That is real important, with the younger ones especially. They need a routine. Children need a routine. I didn't realize as much. My wife kept these kids on a routine. I mean, it was flexible because, you know, things happen in life. Some people have a routine so strict that something happens and the whole day is ruined, right? You have to be flexible with your routine, but there has to be a routine. And getting them to bed at a certain time, here's what a routine does to children. It creates security. The more secure a child feels, the more apt they are to obey. The more secure a child feels, the more apt they are to listen and obey. And structure gives them security. Meal times are sort of at the same time. And you know what? No, they don't get to pick what they want to eat every meal. Because, you know, M&M's and Cheerios is not going to help you grow up to be a good adult. And since our job is to get them to be a good adult, I know I've told this story before, but my daughters will still talk about this. Because my son never had this problem, eat, okay. I don't like this. Your mom spent all day fixing this food. It's good for you. There's chicken, and there's some potatoes, and there's some beans and some salad, or corn. Although we had to watch the corn because our one daughter, Jen, would stuff it up her nose and then act like I ate my corn. Of course, we knew, and I ate my corn. Okay, well, there's a problem. But I don't know how many nights, because the rule was you eat what's in front of you, at least a portion. I mean, maybe it's too much, maybe, but you have to eat a portion of what's in front of you. Oh no, just give me some crackers. No, this is what you're going to eat. If you can eat crackers, you can eat this, and there's no dessert. And it'd be 10 o'clock at night, and this is one of these little girls would come out, just half awake. Daddy, I'm so hungry. Well, all I got is the food Mom made. Okay. And it'd be all wrapped up in the fridge, cold. We didn't have a microwave, we took it out, unwrapped it, and they'd eat their food, I'd say, you want some ice cream now? And I really look, and I still think of how wonderful those nights were with my daughters, with these little girls, and we're sitting there eating our ice cream, just the two of us, And it's 10, 11 o'clock at night, and then they'd go off to bed, and, but that was the rule. This is what's good for you. Eating nothing but, like I said, eating nothing but M&Ms and Cocoa Puffs. No, we didn't have Cocoa Puffs, but M&Ms and Cocoa Puffs, it's not good for you. And no, that's not what you're going to eat for dinner. It's hard when you see them and they're crying, I'm hungry. I know, well, this is the food you have. There are people who are really hungry. They do anything to eat this. But that's cruel. No, they grew up to be pretty much self-sufficient adults. I don't worry about my kids that much. They'll do just fine. Yeah. Because that's the way they became. I can't say that was a lot of me. That was a lot of my wife. She had a lot more influence on them than I did. I played with them a lot, okay? Now, what can they do with their time? One thing, every child should have chores they do because they're part of the family. Every child should have chores they do because they're part of the family and they're expected to get them done. And they lose privileges if they don't do them. Why? Remember I gave the sermon about a year ago on children who learn how to work are much more productive adults? They've been able to prove that. You teach them how to work. Teach them how to read. I worry about the ability of people to be truly literate. I mean, to be able to process more than 300 to 500 words. And that's the average blog is 300 to 500 words because the average person today can't. It's hard to process more than 300 to 500 words. I find myself sometimes have to force myself to sit and read a book. Now, once I'm into it, I'm fine. But it's like, I just want to get to the no. You have to know the context. You have to know all the background. You have to have this information. It's important. Teaching children to read will put them way ahead. Way ahead. Playing outside. There's certain organizations, I really think that all children should play some kind of little sports. I don't mean, it doesn't matter if they're an athlete or not. There's little soccer leagues around where the little ones can run around and kick the ball. But sports is very important in development of certain ages. Now, once they get to a certain age and they're not really an athlete, that's not important. What's important is to learn teamwork and to learn to enjoy playing and learning how to not get mad when things don't go your way or you get fouled by accident or the other team wins. And you learn that self-control. Hobbies. You know what? Whatever happened, and you meet little kids every once in a while. Look, I collect seashells. I don't care what it is. Wow, good. They look for them. They know about them. They can tell you things. You have an 8-year-old come up and say, this is a fossil, and it's a blah, 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 and it's wow, I don't know all that, and they're telling it to you because they collect fossils. Children should have interests that are their interests because it's theirs, not yours. Encourage that. Now, when I say all this, be careful not to fill their days with so many activities that they never have downtime. That's not good for a child either. Children need downtime, just like you and I need downtime. Because you know one of the most dangerous things that happen to children? Boredom. Boredom. Remember, this all focuses down on one thing. You must love God, know His ways in your heart, and spend your time teaching them and modeling them those ways. That's what parenting is. That's the focal point of everything you're doing. John Rosemont, I read that little story from that book he wrote so many years ago. He had another comment that I thought was very interesting I wrote down years ago. He said, children show respect to their parents by obeying them. Parents show respect to their children by expecting them to obey. I think that's a good point. I respect you. I expect you to do that. Because that's what as I will tell especially my grandsons, hey, sorry, you're going to be a man someday, and that's what a man does. So go finish the job. That's what you do. So it's expected of you. That's showing respect. You have to show them respect too. It's messy raising children. Nobody does it 100% right. Everybody makes mistakes. And children survive, right? But we can have a very important impact. And remember, discipline is part of that. But the reason for discipline is to teach them self-control. And the reason for self-control is so that they can learn God's way. So that they can someday be called by God to do His way, to do His work. And also, remember this, what we read there in Deuteronomy is based on loving God. So we have to help our children understand that God loves them. And the most important way that children learn that God loves them is because their parents love them.